Hey everyone, and welcome to the Exalted Entrepreneur Show. I'm so happy to be here with Heather Carlucci, psychic medium and medical intuitive, and a Virgo with her rising in Scorpio and moon in Leo, like me. So, welcome, Heather. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, as you said, I'm a psychic medium and medical intuitive. I work with business CEOs, business leaders, CEOs, creative leaders on projections and business dealings. I also do regular psychic readings. And then, of course, I do medical intuitive work. So I work with surgeons, doctors, or just patients
Okay.
on looking deeper into their medical health.
That's really interesting. So, right now, do you just feel things because I know that I have intuition, and I know that we all, I consider myself to a certain degree, I have psychic experiences, but what does it actually mean to be a psychic medium, full time,
Yes.
and what's it like walking through life that way?
Well, I've been doing it full time without anything else for full 5 years. Although
Wow.
I've been this way my whole life. I now have to make a concerted effort not to pick up things.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is there a switch that you can kind of?
Yes. I have to be careful if I'm not paying attention. It can exhaust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, just wondering, is there almost a code of ethics type of thing? Meaning, do you ever feel like you're picking up on something and maybe that person doesn't even want to know or something like that? Is there anything like that?
Well, you mean
involved?
walking down the street?
Yeah, if you
Yes,
pick up on something, do you just share it or
No,
how does that
I
work?
do not. I have a code of ethics. I don't know if we all have a code of ethics. Actually, as we all know, a lot of mediums and psychics do not have a code of ethics. I do. I do not. I will not walk just up to somebody randomly unless it's such a peculiar situation and the vibe is really out there.
Yeah.
That rarely ever happens.
So
But I will not. If somebody is talking to me and they know what I do, and it sort of comes up, I will ask first before I say anything.
Okay,
I'm like, could I do a little read for you? Because I'm picking something up. And then I'll sort of say something.
Okay.
But it's only if I understand that there's some sort of unspeakable connection between us.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I find if I walk up to a stranger, it's so intrusive.
Yeah, because I think sometimes when people hear, oh, you're an astrologer or you're a psychic, they kind of put the guard up almost. And I know I do. I would be like, well, can she see through my soul? And does she know my thoughts or whatever? So I just think that's such an interesting part of your work. I mean, this is your profession. And so, with the Scorpio rising, there's such a privacy component. Scorpio really is a private sign. And I feel like, just having that sensitivity to others where, you do have to kind of check in with people and make sure that they want to receive that message.
Yeah. And I am really private, and I'm a big personality. I don't have a problem being in front of people. I'm big. Right. So
Leo moon.
I'm all about it. But so it's always surprising to some people how private I am and how very specific I am about how I read, when I read. It's a big deal. I have to be on the clock, literally.
Yeah.
And I will only read a certain number of days a week because I know it exhausts me and I keep it very private. I do keep it very private.
So I saw that you wrote that you speak to dead people for a living. So can we talk about that? Because, again, Scorpio rules death and the underworld and spirits and things like that and the occult. And so you've brought that into the realm of Virgo of service. And so what do you do for people? How do you
things I
actually
don't know.
I'll tell you.
Well,
so what does that look like with a client? And does every psychic speak to dead people?
No, that's the mediumship part.
Okay.
That is the mediumship part.
did not know
So,
that.
yeah, mediumship is basically speaking to energies or dead people, however you want to do it. The psychic part of it has to do with what they call the 8 clairsenses, of which I have all 8. So it's a little overwhelming sometimes. And then my medical intuitive work comes in very differently.
Okay.
It's like sort of reading a certain kind of X-ray, only where I can see not just your bones, but your organs, plasma, tissue. And then I also feel it on my own body when I'm reading you.
Oh my goodness.
So I know if your kidneys are having an issue, what's going on with your knees, that kind of
Fascinating.
thing. Yeah.
And so you said that you've been like this forever, meaning you've always had these gifts. But did you have like a psychic awakening, or was it just from as early as you could remember that you had those capabilities?
As early as I can remember. And as I sort of figured out, as people have been asking me about it for the last number of years, that I've sort of come out of the closet about it.
Yeah.
It was the moment I figured out that other people weren't like this. Because when you're born, you just assume everybody is sort of like you. And it was at that moment. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I was beginning to realize, oh God, why are people making these ridiculous decisions? Or, there's somebody talking to me in my bedroom, which, really freaked out my aunt one day.
Yeah. Did it ever freak you out, or because it was natural for you, you just kind of thought it was normal?
No, I thought in time, as I got older and people were not reacting well to what I had to say, that it was my imagination. Everybody kept saying it was my imagination. Yeah. Except that a lot of the times, even as a kid, I was not wrong about my thoughts, and I saw things coming. I had a good idea about things. I sort of could foresee people's feelings about things. It gets people don't realize that this work gets very nuanced. It gets very sensitive to dips in energy, feelings, and stuff like that. Yeah. And also, because when I approach my work, to me, it's all very scientific, right? Yeah. So I don't know what part of my chart reads that.
Well, I think there's that Virgo component there where it's like analytical.
Yeah.
Science in general is more associated with Aquarius, the scientist, but they're both, Mercury, not to get too astro-techy here, but like Mercury rules Virgo, right? The higher octave of Mercury is Uranus.
Right.
Some people pronounce it that way. But Uranus, for example, is the higher mind, and it has to do with like science and kind of like thinking outside the box and playing in the quantum realm of like possibility. So there is a connection there because of that Mercury-Uranus connection. It's funny because right now today, Mercury just ingressed into the sign of Aquarius, which is its exalted placement connected to Uranus. So this is all very relevant to what's happening right now. It's really weird. And I just posted about it, and I was like, there must be a reason that we're doing this today, right now. And so to connect it back, that science, that part of you that's connected to curiosity and things, it's all a mercurial type of energy there. When the higher mind of Mercury is Uranus. So
that's interesting because when I read things, especially medical, I don't read it in so-called a different definition of a mercurial way. To me, it's very what do we learn in science class the minute you walk in?
More like
the energy does not die; it just changes shape. So what happens when we die?
Yeah,
the body dies. Your lifetime here dies. But our energy does not. So where does it go? Right. To me, it's very scientific. And also when I read people medically, I read it very scientifically. You will never hear me referring to chakras or energy waves or anything like that. Wow. To me, it's very, the language that comes out of my mouth is very par for the course medical.
And were you trained in that? Or
no,
that just kind of comes through?
It's the way it happens. There are many times where I'll call a doctor that I work with, because there's only about 7 really open-minded doctors out there into this. No, there's more than that. But I have a couple of doctors that I do work with on the regular. And a word will come to me, and I will not even know that it's an existing medical term. Wow. And I'll say, it's that. And they'll say, yeah, that's legitimate. Or I'll Google it and make sure that it's that. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So did you kind of develop these skills on your own? Did you have like a mentor or anything? Because I know back in the day, way back in the day, there were like mystery schools, and I feel like there was more space in our society for people like you who had these gifts. It wasn't considered like a weird kind of thing or whatever. Right. Not that I'm saying it is.
It's a very different world now.
Yeah, now it's kind of like it's like astrology that it's not taken so seriously. It's more for entertainment or whatever, legally, right. That's actually what it is. But there's not like a college for psychics or whatever, but
No.
Did you have support, or did you kind of just have to figure it out for yourself?
A lot of it was just me being me. And then, of course, just as you grow and you get older, you learn about things. I have had a couple of teachers at the time. I would not have called them teachers. One of them was the first homeopathic teacher a doctor I ever went to for a problem that no doctor was figuring out. And he was extremely spiritual. He's since passed. And he saw in me what I did not know how to put into the world, as best I can say. And he really sort of guided me in the right direction without me really realizing it.
Right.
He really fed it. And that
amazing.
was, so for me, it was that. And then a lot of it is self-education.
Yeah.
Recently, somebody asked me if I went to school for it. And I was like, well, there's no school for this. And they said, well, yeah, I've taken classes. I was like, you can go to school for this shit? Right. I mean, I find it really amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, how do you teach this?
Right.
I mean, you can, in fact, teach intuition, but it's always sort of been such a part of me that I wouldn't even know. It's sort of teaching somebody how to, have brown hair.
Right.
It's just, you're born with it or you're not. You can change it, but yeah.
Yeah. Is it something that you ever thought about teaching, like yourself, or is it more, like you said, something that you feel people are born with and more of their own personal journey?
I think mentorship is really important, especially because in this work, you have to figure out how to hold space for people.
Yeah.
People really come very open and it gets very emotional. And then when you're dealing with somebody who's passed over, you have to deal with somebody who's in grief.
Yeah.
So I do believe in mentorship completely. So I would say more like that. Yeah. If I had an opportunity to teach in a space that I thought was really pertinent, I would teach. Cool. But I would also like to keep it small because I think the personal of this is really important.
Yeah. So just going back to the business piece, because it's like interesting. So have you always worked with business owners similarly to the medical intuitive part, or is that something that came along at a certain point in your journey?
It came way before doing this full time. Yeah, I was a chef and restaurateur for 30 years before I sort of came out of this said closet. The woo closet is what they call it. The broom closet. They also call it the woo closet. Yeah. And for me, I was already pretty well established in business. And as I was leaving the restaurant business, I was consulting a lot. And I realized as I was consulting for people and going in and figuring out what piece of real estate they should buy, do they rent this space, that I was reading it. And it kind of went off from there. And then I got a few clients that were sort of, I would say, very powerful cultural leaders. And after that, we started working together and they passed my name along.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it was like a word of mouth type of thing.
Absolutely.
So what's your favorite type of readings to do, or is it all, or, do you have one that's like your real favorite?
A kind of reading? I wouldn't call it the kind of reading, but I think there's a point at which what I'm giving the person really resonates. And in order to do this work, I have to really step into it without any ego. So imagine sitting in front of somebody and really making sure you don't judge anything about them. It's not easy because our judgment really is part of our survival, right? To sort of feel it. And part of our insecurities. That kind of moment in which everything sort of comes together, that's the reading I love to do.
Wow.
Yeah. As long as somebody comes in really, you don't have to believe in what I do. Only I have to believe in what I do. But as long as you don't come in too tight and it's really open and it flows, I love that.
So it's more about like the energetic state of the receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether and a lot of the medical work I do are pretty sick people. So even in that way, when somebody's really ready to hear and ready to sort of like be tended to and cared for, that's my favorite.
Wow. And that's very Virgo too, because, when every sign has its shadow frequency, we could say, or like the kind of lower way of expressing it. And then it has its gifts or the higher expression. And we know Virgo's highest expression is service. But the shadow of it is like, because Virgos are so detail-oriented and so sensitive to the minutia of what's going on, there could be that tendency to kind of go into judgmental, to kind of judge it or analyze it and things like that. But I think that the way to actually channel that in a way of service is by, like you said, stepping into service and just focusing it on like the love and the, like how this is actually helping someone. I think that's something that everybody can take, where even if you don't have any Virgo energy, like we all kind of go into judgment sometimes, or we kind of judge ourselves or maybe a client. Like we feel like, it's tight, like you said, but when you focus on the service piece,
it's all about that.
Then
it's about doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget a lot that it's about the work, not how great the work is. Yeah.
And like you said, taking the ego out, there's no ego in service.
No, my life as a chef was all ego. I did 30 years of ego.
It's like a very competitive field, right?
Very competitive, yeah. And I was very ambitious.
Yeah. And do you miss that? I mean, do you still like do lots of cooking and
no.
Or is it just totally not part of your
I don't miss it, because by the time I was done, I was no longer in love with it. And you have to be in love with it in order to do it. And I had lived very hard as a chef.
Right.
And nothing you can't sustain that.
Wow, yeah.
It was already 30 years. I thought I'd eaten everything, drank everything, smoked everything. So I think we're good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, in terms of, where you are at right now in your business, do you do like remote sessions, or is it something that has to be done in person?
Oh, no, I do remote sessions. I do phone sessions. I have a lot of people all over the world at this point. So which I enjoy also, because it's the kind of thing I can really stretch my schedule in different directions.
Yeah, the flexibility.
And I can figure out where to rest.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to
too.
say. I think like having Scorpio, and I tell all my clients who have a strong water, like, you need so much recharging. You need to make sure, I always say, good
is that what it is?
Psychic hygiene, like that's like the one thing. When I see someone's chart, if you're rising water or you have a lot of water, you better be recharging, making sure that you're working on your energetic clock rather than, trying
that
to.
That makes sense.
Right? So
I sure didn't before.
Yeah.
But I absolutely have to now.
Yeah. Especially in this type of work.
Yeah, it's hard to show up for the greater good, when before I just show up and like throw myself in front of a stove. You can be pretty crappy when you do that.
I just want to say, there's the funniest meme ever. Have you seen the movie The Sixth Sense with the little boy?
Yeah, sure.
And he's like, I see dead people. So there's this one, it says Scorpios are like, and it's him, but instead of I see dead people, it's I see fake people. Scorpio is like very real. Like they just get to they're like X-rays. Yeah.
No tolerance.
So that's like my favorite of all time, because, you read right through people, but I love that you bring that ethical, conscious, like you're not judging people. You're not doing it to read through people, but to help them and serve them. And
you can't really judge people when every time I read, you see how unbelievably messy humans are as part of themselves.
Yeah.
Judging doesn't make any sense for us, though we're good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like our comfort zone sometimes.
It is. It really is.
So, Heather, if somebody wants to book a reading with you or just connect or learn more about, like, first of all, medical intuitive work, I think that's definitely one of the more rare fields. Mm-hmm. So where can they learn more, and how can they connect with you?
Well, they can go to my website, heathercarlucci.com. And then I also have my Instagram at Heather Carlucci Medium, where I do an almost daily channelled read.
Oh, cool. Do you ever do like seances? Or is that like a...
I kind of live with dead people. I don't really need to bring them up again.
Those have always creeped me out. I don't know.
It's not my cup of tea. I leave it to the specialists, kind of like astrology. Basically, like, I'm a Virgo, and that's I kind of stop there.
Right.
I don't really... I let you tell me all about me. I don't, I do what I do. And, if it's time to sort of expand, I'll know. I'll find out for sure.
I love that. And I love how every person's path is like so clear to that. Your zone of genius and you stick with it. It
takes a lot of work to do it, and if something needs to shift, I'll shift, Cool. I think I learned that from the restaurant business.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, and it's a real pleasure. I've loved connecting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.